My name is Violet LeClaire. I'm 29 years old. 3 days ago, my sister replaced my wedding vows with a letter she wrote, and I didn't know until I opened it at the altar. The first line read, "I, Violet, confess to my husband that I am not the person you think I am." That was not my handwriting. That was not my name. 150 people stared at me, waiting for me to speak. Then my photographer grabbed my arm. He pulled me aside and said, "I recorded her switching the envelopes. Check my camera, but look at who was standing behind her. Before I tell you everything, please take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if you genuinely care about this story. And drop your location and local time in the comments. I want to know who's here." Now let me take you back 4 years, to the day my grandmother Ruthie died, and my own family turned against me. There's a house on Maple Ridge Road in Cooperton, Georgia. 2 stories, blue roof, wraparound porch, a rose garden out front that's been blooming since 1978. My grandmother, Ruthie LeClaire, planted the first bushes the year she moved in. She was 31 then, younger than I am now. Every summer of my childhood, that house was my whole world. I'd sit on the porch with Grandma Ruthie and shell pecans into a tin bowl while she told me stories about growing up in South Georgia. She taught me how to make her pecan pie from memory. She taught me how to prune roses without gloves because, she said, you need to feel where the dead wood starts. My sister Diane never came. Too boring, too quiet, her words. She'd stay home with our parents in Albany, 2 hours north. That was fine. The house was mine and Grandma Ruthie's. It always felt that way. When Grandma Ruthie was diagnosed with lung cancer, I was 21, fresh out of college with a library sciences degree and $40,000 in student debt. I moved into the house on Maple Ridge and became her full-time caregiver. I drove her to chemo in Macon, 90 minutes each way. I slept on the chair beside her hospital bed more nights than I can count. I cooked, I cleaned, I managed her medications. 4 years I did this. My parents visited maybe 5 times total. Diane came twice. Both times, she measured the rooms. I remember her walking through the hallway with a tape measure. I thought she was helping plan renovations for Grandma Ruthie's bathroom. She wasn't. She was pricing the square footage. I just didn't know it yet. Grandma Ruthie died on a Tuesday morning in October. I was holding her hand. The monitor flatlined, and the room got very still, and I sat there for a long time before I called anyone. The funeral was small. Cooperton Community Church, white pews, yellow chrysanthemums. Half the town came. My parents drove down from Albany. Diane flew in from Atlanta, where she'd just gotten her real estate license. She wore sunglasses inside the church. 3 days later, Grandma Ruthie's attorney read the will in his office on Main Street. It was straightforward. Her savings, about $12,000, split evenly among my parents, Diane, and me. Her furniture, her old Buick, divided as we saw fit. The house on Maple Ridge Road, left solely to me. The silence in that room is something I will never forget. My mother stood up first. Sharon LeClaire, 61 years old, 5'3", voice like a church bell when she wanted it to be. She lived there rent-free for 4 years and now she gets the house? My father, Gerald, said nothing. He looked at me once, then walked out of the room. Just stood in the parking lot with his hands in his pockets. Diane laughed. Not a real laugh. The kind that scrapes the back of your throat. "Congratulations," she said. "You won." I tried to explain. Grandma Ruthie wanted me to have it. I didn't ask for it. I didn't manipulate anyone. I showed up. That's all I did. Nobody wanted to hear it. That was the last time all 4 of us were in the same room without someone raising their voice. And I didn't know it then. But my mother had a reason for that reaction far beyond sentiment. A reason I wouldn't learn about for months. It started within a week. I was removed from the family group chat on a Wednesday. No announcement. I just opened my phone and the thread was gone. When I texted Diane about it, she left me on read. Then the calls started. Not to me, but about me. My mother worked the phone like a campaign manager. She called every aunt, uncle, and cousin on both sides. The message was always the same. Violet manipulated Mama Ruthie when she was sick. Violet isolated her. Violet made sure nobody else was in the room when the will was signed. None of it was true. The only person who called me back was Aunt Bev, my mother's younger sister, Beverly Thurston. Bev lived in Savannah, 2 hours south. She was blunt on the phone. "Honey, your mama is telling everyone you stole the house. I thought you should know." I thanked her. I didn't cry. Not yet. The proof came a month later at my cousin's wedding in Valdosta. I drove an hour and a half to be there. When I arrived, no one sat with me. I was placed at a back table near the kitchen, alone. During cocktail hour, I heard Diane's voice carry across the patio. She was talking to a group of cousins. "She's the one I told you about." They all looked at me. Then they looked away. I drove home in the dark, pulled into the driveway on Maple Ridge, sat in the car and stared at Grandma Ruthie's rose garden through the windshield. The bushes were overgrown. I'd been neglecting them since the funeral. I went inside. I was not going to sell that house. Then Aunt Bev called again. "There's something else you need to know. Your mother hasn't made a mortgage payment in 3 months, on her own house. That's what this is really about." Diane started calling at night. Not during the day. She knew I worked at the Cooperton Public Library from 8 to 5. She called at 11, at midnight, at 1 in the morning, always from her cell, never blocked, so the caller ID would flash her name across my dark bedroom ceiling. The first few calls were businesslike. She talked about fair market value and listing agents. She quoted the house at $285,000, split 3 ways, that was $95,000 each. "Think about what you could do with $95,000, Violet." I said no. The calls got uglier. She mentioned contesting the will. She mentioned hiring an attorney. She said things like, "I will make your life miserable," and "You have no idea what I'm capable of." One night, 2 in the morning, she asked, "How much would it take?" "It's not about money," I said. "Everything is about money. You just don't know it yet." Then my father sent an email. Gerald Leclerc was not a man of many words, so when he wrote, it carried weight. The email was 3 sentences. "Your grandmother would be ashamed of what you're doing to this family. Sell the house. End this." That one hurt worse than anything Diane said. I stopped sleeping well. My supervisor at the library noticed. I lost weight, 7 pounds in a month. I started double-checking the locks on the front door before bed, which I'd never done before. One night, Marcus was at my kitchen table. We'd been dating for 6 months. Diane called at midnight, and I made the mistake of answering on speaker. He heard everything. When I hung up, I was shaking. He didn't say a word. He just pulled me into his chest and held on. It was the first time he saw me cry over my family. It would not be the last. I want to be clear about something. I did not want a war. 6 months after the will was read, I sat at my kitchen table and wrote a long email to my parents and Diane. I proposed a compromise. The house stays in my name. That was non-negotiable. But I would open it to the whole family. Thanksgiving at Maple Ridge, Christmas Eve, summer weekends. Anyone could visit, anytime, no questions asked. Grandma Ruthie would have wanted that. My mother replied the same day. One line. "We don't want to visit your house. We want what's fair." I tried again. I called Diane and asked her to lunch at a diner halfway between Cooperton and Atlanta. She agreed, which surprised me. I drove an hour and 15 minutes. She was already seated when I arrived. She didn't order food. "List the house," she said. "Split it 3 ways. That's the only conversation I'm having with you." "Diane, that house means something to me. Grandma Ruthie wanted—" "You sound just like Mama Ruthie, stubborn and selfish." I set $30 on the table, enough for both our meals, and I left. I didn't say another word. There was nothing left to say. I found out 2 weeks later that Diane had contacted a realtor in Cooperton, a woman named Janet Hobbs, and asked her to run a comparative market analysis on Grandma Ruthie's house. My house. Without my knowledge, without my permission. Janet called me directly because her name was on the title. Your sister said you were co-owners, Janet told me. But that's not what the deed shows. I offered them the table. They wanted the whole house. And somewhere in Atlanta, Diane was already planning something worse. I just didn't know it yet. Marcus proposed on a Saturday evening in the rose garden. He'd been helping me restore it, pruning, mulching, replanting the bushes that had died during the months I'd let everything go. We were kneeling in the dirt, side by side, and he pulled a ring from his jacket pocket like it was the most natural thing in the world. No grand speech, just, Violet LeClaire, will you marry me? I said yes with mud on my hands and tears on my face. We set the date for 8 months out. The ceremony would be at Cooperton Community Church, the same church where Grandma Ruthie's funeral was held. Reception in the fellowship hall next door. We budgeted $8,000. Tight, but doable. I told my parents. I was braced for coldness. Instead, I got warmth. And that should have been my first warning. My mother called within an hour. Her voice was soft, almost tender. Let us help, honey. Diane and I can handle the decorations and day of coordination. It'll save you a fortune. Marcus was cautious. It's your call, he said. But if they're offering, that saves us close to $2,000. I wanted to believe they were coming around. I wanted my mother at my wedding. I wanted my sister standing beside me. So I said yes, with conditions. I would write my own vows, choose my own dress, and pick the photographer. Diane accepted the role of maid of honor. She'd hold my vow envelope during the ceremony and hand it to me at the altar. That was tradition, she said. That was what sisters did. I handed her the one thing she needed to destroy me. And I did it with a smile. Marcus chose our photographer, his college friend, Nolan Briggs. 40 years old, meticulous, detail-obsessed. He films everything, Marcus said. You'll love the footage. I had no idea how right he was. The rehearsal dinner was at Garland's, the only sit-down restaurant in Cooperton. 15 people around a long table, the wedding party, immediate family, Marcus's parents, Nolan. Everything felt almost normal. Gerald sat at the end of the table and ate his steak without comment. Sharon moved between conversations like a hostess, refilling wine glasses, laughing at jokes. She hugged me in front of everyone. I'm so proud of you, baby, she said, pressing her cheek to mine. She hadn't called me baby in 4 years. I wanted to believe it. God, I wanted to believe it. After dinner, Diane collected the vow envelopes, Marcus's and mine. She held them up playfully. I'll keep these safe in the bridal suite. Don't worry about a thing. She tucked them into her bag with a wink. Nolan was sitting in the corner, nursing a bourbon. He didn't talk much at dinners. He was more of a watcher. He told me later what he saw. Diane leaving the table early, walking toward the church's bridal suite, Sharon following her about 2 minutes later. Neither of them came back for 20 minutes. Nolan had his camera with him. He was testing the low-light settings in the church for the next day, a legitimate reason to be shooting. He left the camera recording on a shelf in the bridal suite hallway while he checked the sanctuary lighting, a small, quiet decision that would change everything. That night I went home to Maple Ridge. I lay on Grandma Ruthie's bed and read through my vows one last time. I'd written them by hand on cream-colored stationery. The closing line was about the roses, about showing up, about love being a quiet daily thing. Marcus called at 11. Tomorrow, we start our life. Tomorrow, I said. I slept well that night. I shouldn't have. I woke up at 6. October light through the bedroom window, thin and gold. The rose garden was heavy with dew. I went outside in my robe and slippers and watered the bushes one last time as Violet LeClaire. Tomorrow I'd be Violet Whitfield. But the roses would still be Grandma Ruthie's. I drove to the church at 9. The fellowship hall was transformed. White linens, mason jars with wildflowers, string lights that Sharon and Diane had hung the day before. I had to admit it was beautiful. They'd done more than I expected. Diane met me in the bridal suite. She helped me into my dress. A simple A-line I'd found at a consignment shop in Macon for $300. She zipped the back, straightened the hem, and stepped back. "You look beautiful, Vi." My throat tightened. For 1 second, one real, unguarded second, she looked like my sister again. The girl who used to braid my hair before school. The one who carried me piggyback through Grandma Ruthie's yard. "Thank you, Diane," she smiled. "Today is going to be unforgettable. I promise you that." The vow envelope was waiting on the dressing table. I picked it up. It was heavier than I remembered. The paper was white, brighter white than the cream stationery I'd used. I turned it over in my hands. Maybe Diane transferred it to a nicer envelope, I thought. She was always particular about presentation. That was the real estate agent in her. I set it down without opening it. I wanted to keep the emotion fresh for the altar. I wanted to feel every word when I read them to Marcus for the first time in front of everyone. That decision, not opening the envelope, is the one I replay most. 150 people filled the pews of Cooperton Community Church at 2 o'clock that afternoon. Family from both sides, co-workers from the library, neighbors who'd known Grandma Ruthie for decades, Mrs. Dalton from across the street, the Hendersons from the corner lot. Marcus's parents, Frank and Darlene Whitfield, drove up from Valdosta. His college friends took up the third row, left side. The organ started. Gerald took my arm at the back of the church. He was wearing a suit I'd never seen before, charcoal gray, too tight in the shoulders. He didn't say anything as we walked down the aisle. He didn't need to. His grip was firm and his eyes were straight ahead. Marcus was standing at the altar in a navy suit. His eyes were red before I even reached him. Nolan was positioned at the left corner, camera up, recording. Sharon sat in the front row, clutching a handkerchief. Diane stood at the maid of honor position, bouquet in hand, smiling. Pastor Davis opened with a reading from 1 Corinthians, then a hymn, then the ring exchange. Everything moved smoothly, almost dreamlike. Then he said, "The bride and groom have written their own vows. Marcus, you may begin." Marcus pulled a folded paper from his breast pocket. His hands were steady. He read slowly, clearly, and every word was real. He talked about the first time he saw Grandma Ruthie's rose garden, about the night he realized he loved me. I was re-shelving books at the library and singing under my breath, and I didn't know he was watching. He said, "I fell in love with you the night you showed me your grandmother's garden and said, 'This is who I am.'" I was crying before he finished. Pastor Davis turned to me. "Violet, your turn." I opened the envelope. The paper was wrong. It registered in my fingers before my eyes caught up. Printer paper. Smooth, bright white, machine-cut edges. My vows were handwritten on cream stationery with a slight texture. This was not my paper. I unfolded it. The first line, "I, Evelyn, confess to my husband that I am not the person you think I am." My vision tunneled. The words below swam in and out of focus, but I caught fragments. Manipulated her in her final years. Debts I've never told you about. Our marriage is built on lies. 3 seconds. That's how long I stood there reading. 3 seconds that stretched into something endless. This was not my handwriting. This was typed. This was not my name. My name is Violet. I looked up. 150 faces stared back at me, some confused, some concerned. Marcus had taken half a step forward, his brow creased. "Violet, are you okay?" I looked at Diane. She was standing 4 feet to my left, her bouquet at her waist, her face perfectly still, not shocked, not confused, still. I looked at my mother. Front row, center. Handkerchief frozen against her cheek. Eyes locked on mine. The church was so quiet I could hear the ceiling fan turning. I understood then. Not all the details, those would come later, but the shape of it, the why, the who. The 4 years of pressure and phone calls and isolation, all funneling to this moment. This altar, this audience. They wanted me to crumble in front of everyone who'd ever been told I was the selfish one. They wanted proof. 150 people were watching me unravel, and my sister was counting on it. I folded the paper. My hands were shaking, but I folded it in half, then in half again, and I held it at my side. I took one breath, then another. Marcus was watching me. He knew. I could see it in the way his jaw had tightened. He didn't know what had happened, but he knew something was deeply wrong. He reached for my hand. I took it. I stepped closer to the microphone. It seems my written vows have been misplaced. I paused. Let the words settle. So I'm going to speak from my heart instead. A ripple of whispers moved through the pews. I didn't look at Diane. I didn't look at my mother. I looked at Marcus. And I spoke. I said what I could remember, not word for word, not the careful sentences I'd spent weeks polishing, but the truth underneath them. I talked about Grandma Ruthie's rose garden, about what it means to show up for someone every day, not just on the easy days, about Marcus kneeling in the dirt beside me, replanting a dead rose bush, not because he had to, but because it mattered to me, about choosing someone. I don't need a piece of paper to tell you who I am, I said. You already know. Marcus squeezed my hand so hard my knuckles pressed together. Pastor Davis smiled. He pronounced us husband and wife. Marcus kissed me, and 150 people applauded, and the organ played, and we walked back down the aisle together. I kept the folded letter. I did not throw it away. I did not tear it up. I slipped it into the hidden pocket sewn into the lining of my dress. I was going to need it later. Okay, I need to pause here for a second, because I know some of you are thinking, why didn't you call her out right there? Why didn't you hold that letter up and read it into the microphone and let 150 people hear exactly what your sister did? And honestly, I thought about it. For about half a second, standing at that altar, I pictured myself unfolding that paper and reading every fabricated word out loud. I pictured Diane's face, my mother's face, the gasps. But here's the thing. This was my wedding, my moment, my vows to Marcus. And I was not going to let Diane turn my altar into her stage. She wanted a scene. She wanted me hysterical, humiliated, falling apart in front of the same people she'd spent 4 years poisoning against me. If I'd exploded right there, every single person in those pews would have walked away saying, "See, Sharon was right. That girl is unstable." So I made a choice. I chose my husband over my anger. I chose dignity over chaos. But don't worry, I wasn't done. Not by a long shot. Now here's my question for you. If you were standing at that altar, holding a fake letter your own sister wrote to humiliate you, what would you have done? Would you have read it out loud? Walked out? Confronted her right there? Or done what I did? Drop your answer in the comments. I genuinely want to know. And while you're down there, if you're watching this at 2 in the morning and you can't sleep, I see you. I was you 3 months ago, replaying every detail in my head. All right, let's get back to the reception, because that's where everything changed. The reception was in the fellowship hall next door. String lights, buffet tables, a rented speaker playing Motown. Everyone filed in from the church, and within 10 minutes the room was warm and loud and full of people eating pulled pork and cornbread. I smiled. I hugged guests. I thanked people for coming. Under the table, Marcus held my left hand so tightly my wedding band pressed into my finger. "What happened up there?" he whispered. "Not here," I said. "Soon." 20 minutes into the reception, Nolan appeared at my shoulder. He leaned in close. "Violet, I need to show you something. Right now." Marcus stood immediately. The three of us slipped out a side door into the hallway. Fluorescent lights, linoleum floor, the muffled sound of laughter from the other side of the wall. Nolan had his camera. He flipped the view screen open and pressed play. The footage was from the night before. The bridal suite hallway, low light, slightly grainy but perfectly clear. Timestamp, 8:47 p.m. Diane walked into the frame. She went to the dressing table where the vow envelopes had been placed. She opened the small decorative box. She removed my cream-colored envelope. She replaced it with a white one. And standing directly behind her, holding the white envelope out, was my mother. Sharon LeClaire. Clear as daylight. She handed it to Diane the way you'd hand someone a grocery list. Casual, rehearsed. They exchanged a few words. The camera had no audio at that distance. And then they left together. The whole thing took less than 90 seconds. I watched it twice. Marcus watched it once and closed his eyes. "How long did you know?" Marcus asked Nolan. "I reviewed the footage this morning. I couldn't find you alone before the ceremony. I'm sorry." Marcus looked at me. "What do you want to do?" I leaned against the hallway wall. Through the door I could hear music, clinking glasses, my mother's laugh carrying above the noise. She was in there right now, playing the proud mother of the bride, hugging relatives, dabbing her eyes with that handkerchief. And 30 minutes ago she'd watched me fumble at the altar with the letter she helped plant. 4 years. 4 years of midnight phone calls, of being erased from the family chat, of sitting alone at my cousin's wedding while my sister pointed me out like an exhibit, of my father emailing me that Grandma Ruthie would be ashamed, of my mother telling every relative I'd stolen a dying woman's house. And now this. My wedding vows. The most personal thing I've ever written, swapped out for a fabricated confession designed to break me in front of 150 witnesses. "I'm not going to make a scene," I said, "but I'm not going to pretend this didn't happen." Marcus studied my face. "What are you thinking?" "The toast. During the slideshow, everyone will already be watching the screen. Nolan can switch the input." Nolan nodded. "The projector's already set up for the photo slideshow. I can patch the camera feed in 30 seconds. "Are you sure about this?" Marcus asked. I looked at him. "They counted on me staying quiet. That's what I always do, not tonight." He held my gaze for a long moment. Then he pulled the folded letter from his jacket. I'd passed it to him after the ceremony. "You'll want this too." We walked back into the reception. I fixed my smile. Sharon came over immediately and pressed her palm to my cheek. "Beautiful ceremony, honey." "Thank you, Mom." I held her hand against my face for 1 second. The best is yet to come. They counted on me crumbling. They forgot I was raised by Ruthie LeClaire. Diane gave her maid of honor toast at 7:15. She stood at the head table with a champagne flute and a folded note card, and a smile that could sell waterfront property. The room quieted. 150 people turned their chairs. "For those of you who don't know me," she began, "I'm Diane, Violet's big sister, and I have to tell you, being her sister has been one of the greatest gifts of my life." She paused for effect. Someone at a back table said, "Ah." She talked about our childhood, about braiding my hair before school, which she did do twice when I was 6, about summers at Grandma Ruthie's house, which she skipped every single year. She described a version of our relationship that had never existed, and she delivered it so smoothly that half the room was misty-eyed. "I've always been Violet's biggest supporter," she said. "Through every challenge, every hard season, I've been right there." Marcus's hand found my knee under the table. He pressed once. I didn't flinch. Then Diane looked directly at me. Eye contact. Held it. Violet has always known how to keep things to herself. A knowing pause. To the room, it sounded like a compliment. My sister calling me private, reserved, graceful. But I understood. Sharon understood. Gerald, at the far end of the table, shifted in his chair. She was talking about the house. She was talking about keeping what she believed should have been shared. "To my baby sister," Diane said, raising her glass, "may your marriage be as honest as your heart." The room erupted in applause. Glasses clinked. Sharon pressed her handkerchief to her eyes again. Diane sat down beside me and placed her hand on my arm. "Wasn't that nice?" she whispered. I looked across the room at Nolan. He was standing near the projector, one hand resting on his laptop bag. He met my eyes and gave a single, small nod. 20 minutes later, my father found me on the back patio. I'd stepped out for air. The evening was cool, October in South Georgia, the kind of night where you can smell pine and red clay. The parking lot lights threw long shadows across the concrete. Gerald came through the door with his hands in his pockets, the same posture he had the day he walked out of the attorney's office 4 years ago. Your mother is losing our house, Violet. No greeting, no congratulations on my wedding, just that. The bank is giving us 60 days. If we don't come up with $40,000, we're done. I turned to face him. I know, Dad. Aunt Bev told me. Something moved behind his eyes. Surprise, then anger. At Bev, not at himself. So you've known for months and you still won't help? I offered to help. I offered to let you move in temporarily. I offered to co-sign a refinance. We don't want your help. His voice hardened. We want what's fair. Grandma Ruthie decided what was fair. Gerald stepped closer. The parking lot light caught the gray in his stubble. Your grandmother was a sentimental old woman who played favorites. The words hit like a slap. I've been called selfish. I've been called a thief. I've been cut off, lied about, and isolated. I absorbed all of it. But my father standing on the back patio of my wedding reception, calling the woman who raised me, who raised all of us, really, a sentimental old woman who played favorites. That was the line. Don't you ever talk about her like that again. He opened his mouth. I didn't wait. I walked back inside, past the buffet table, past the dance floor, straight to Marcus. It's time, I said. I was halfway across the fellowship hall when I saw her. Back table, near the exit. A woman in a plum-colored dress, silver hair pinned up, sitting alone with a glass of sweet tea. Aunt Bev, Beverly Thurston. My mother's younger sister, the one Sharon had cut out of the family for siding with me. She wasn't on the guest list. Sharon had made sure of that. I stopped walking. My eyes burned. I crossed the room and wrapped my arms around her before I could think about it. She smelled like gardenia perfume, the same kind Grandma Ruthie used to wear. How are you here? I whispered. Marcus called me last week, she said. Told me the date and time. Said you'd want me here even if your mama didn't. I pulled back and looked at her. She was already studying my face, reading it the way she always could. Something happened tonight, she said. It wasn't a question. Yes. Sharon spotted us from across the room. I saw her face change. The color drained out of it like water from a sink. She walked over fast, heels clicking on the linoleum. What are you doing here, Beverly? Bev didn't stand. She took a sip of her tea and set it down. I'm at my niece's wedding, Sharon. Sit down. My mother stared at her, then at me. Then she turned and walked away without another word. Bev took my hand. Her grip was firm and warm. Whatever's happening tonight, you stand your ground, you hear me? Yes, ma'am. One more thing. Bev's voice dropped. Your mama called me last week. She said you'd learn a lesson at this wedding. I don't know what she meant, but I'm here. The room got 10 degrees colder. I squeezed Bev's hand once, then let go. I had work to do. Marcus's college friend Kevin was our MC. At 8 o'clock, he tapped the microphone and asked everyone to take their seats. The bride and groom have prepared a special slideshow, he announced. Grab your drinks, settle in. The lights dimmed. The projector hummed. Photos began cycling on the pull-down screen. Marcus as a toddler in overalls. Me at 7 missing both front teeth. The two of us at a county fair last summer. Grandma Ruthie sitting in her garden with a watering can. That one drew a soft murmur from the older guests who knew her. I watched the photos for a minute, then I stood. Marcus gave my hand one final squeeze under the table. I picked up the wireless microphone from the head table and walked to the front of the room. Thank you, everyone, for being here tonight, I said. Thank you to everyone who helped make this day possible. I looked at Sharon. I looked at Diane. Especially my mother and sister, who volunteered to handle the decorations and coordination. They smiled. Sharon inclined her head modestly. I took a breath. Before we continue, there's something I need to share with everyone in this room. Something that happened tonight that I think all of you should see. The smiles faded. I reached into Marcus's jacket, which was draped over my chair, and pulled out the folded letter. I held it up. A single sheet of white printer paper. This is not my wedding vows. My voice was steady. I was surprised by how steady it was. Someone replaced my vows with this letter before the ceremony. I found out when I opened the envelope at the altar. The room went dead silent. 150 people. Not a cough, not a chair creak. I want you all to see how it happened. I nodded at Nolan. He pressed play. The footage filled the screen. Bridal suite hallway. Timestamp, 8:47 p.m. the night before. The image was slightly grainy, but the faces were unmistakable. Diane walked into frame from the right. She moved with purpose. No hesitation, no looking around. She went straight to the dressing table, opened the decorative box, and removed the cream-colored envelope. My envelope. My vows. She set it aside and placed a white envelope in its place. Then the camera caught the second figure. Standing just behind Diane, partially in the doorway, holding the white envelope out with both hands. My mother. Sharon LeClaire. She passed it to Diane the way you'd hand off a baton. Diane took it, placed it in the box, and closed the lid. Sharon touched her shoulder. They exchanged a few words. No audio, but their body language was relaxed. Practiced. They walked out of frame together. The timestamp read, 8:48 p.m. 90 seconds, start to finish. The video ended. The screen went dark. Nobody moved. Then it hit. The sound. Not gasps, not shouts, something worse. A low, collective murmur that spread through the room like a current. Chairs shifted. Heads turned. 150 people looked from the blank screen to the front row. Sharon was on her feet. Her face was the color of raw dough. That's not what it looks like. Diane hadn't moved. She was still in her maid of honor chair, bouquet on the table in front of her, her face white and locked and absolutely still. Gerald sat at the end of the head table with his hands flat on the surface, staring at the tablecloth. The murmur grew louder. I could hear fragments. Her own mother. At her wedding. Ruthie's granddaughter. Rippling outward like stones dropped in water. I still had the microphone in my hand. I unfolded the letter. Since you've all seen how this got into my hands, I said, I think you deserve to hear what was written on it. I read it aloud. Every word. My voice did not break. I, Evelyn, confess to my husband that I am not the person you think I am. I kept my grandmother's house because I manipulated her in her final years. I have debts I've never told you about. Our marriage is built on lies. I lowered the paper, looked out at the room. None of this is true. Every single word was written to humiliate me in front of all of you. I held the letter up, arms straight, so the back tables could see the typed lines. This was supposed to replace my real vows, the vows I wrote about my grandmother, about Marcus, about love. At a table near the window, an older woman stood, Mrs. Dalton, 79, Grandma Ruthie's neighbor and closest friend for 40 years. She had one hand over her mouth, and she was crying. Diane finally spoke. Her voice came out thin and tight. Violet, stop. You're making a scene. I turned to face her. I'm making a scene? The mic caught every syllable. You replaced my wedding vows with a confession I never wrote. You did it the night before my wedding. Mom handed you the envelope. 150 people just watched it happen. Diane opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. I didn't wait for her answer. I looked at the room. At the faces of people who'd been told for 4 years that I was the selfish one, the manipulator, the granddaughter who stole an old woman's house. You wanted me silent. You wanted me small. Not today. The room erupted. My mother's composure shattered like cheap glass. You ungrateful! Sharon's voice pitched high, cracking in the middle. After everything I've done for you, after I spent 2 days decorating this hall. Sharon. The voice came from the back of the room. Aunt Bev was on her feet, plum dress, silver hair, sweet tea still in her hand. What have you done, Sharon? Bev's voice carried clear across 150 silent people. You told the whole family she stole that house. You called me last week and said she'd learn a lesson tonight. She set her glass down. Well, is this your lesson? Sharon spun toward her sister. Beverly, you don't understand. I was there when Mama Ruthie signed that will. I drove her to the attorney myself. She knew exactly what she was doing. Bev paused. Let it land. She told me, Violet is the only one who stayed. And she was right. The murmur in the room had become something heavier. Faces were hardening. Women in the back rows were shaking their heads. One of Marcus's uncles pushed his chair back from the table. Sharon looked around the room for an ally. She found none. Gerald stood. He took Sharon by the elbow. Let's go. We are not leaving. Sharon, let's go, now. He walked her toward the exit. She was still talking, still gesturing, but her voice was getting smaller with every step. The door closed behind them. No one said goodbye. No one moved to follow. Then Tyler, my cousin, 28, Diane's friend since childhood, stood at his table. His voice shook. Diane asked me to distract Nolan last night. She told me to keep him busy at the bar. I didn't know why until now. He looked at me. I'm sorry, Violet. Diane was alone. She was still standing at the head table, maid of honor position, bouquet untouched, 150 people staring, and not one of them was on her side. I walked toward her, stopped 3 feet away. The microphone was still in my hand, but I lowered it to my hip. I didn't need amplification for this. You think you're better than all of us, don't you? Diane's voice was hoarse. Her mascara had begun to streak. No, I said. I think I deserve to say my wedding vows without them being stolen. That house should have been split. Grandma wasn't thinking straight. Grandma Ruthie was sharper at 82 than you are right now. I held her gaze. She knew who showed up, and she knew who measured the rooms. Diane's face changed. The defiance drained out of it. She remembered. I could see it. The tape measure in the hallway, the way she'd paced the master bedroom, the questions about closet depth. She remembered, and she knew I remembered. And now 150 people had just enough context to understand what I meant. I'm not going to stand here and fight with you at my wedding, I said. But I need you to hear this. We are done. Not because I hate you, because I cannot let you hurt me anymore. The room was so quiet, I could hear the ice settling in someone's glass. Diane looked left, then right. Nobody reached for her. Nobody spoke. She picked up her clutch from the table, tucked it under her arm, and walked toward the door. Her heels clicked on the linoleum, each step echoing in that silent room. The door swung shut behind her. Marcus crossed the room and put his arms around me. The microphone was still live. 150 people heard him whisper, I've got you. I want to be real with you for a second. Standing there, watching my sister walk out that door, I didn't feel victorious. I felt hollow, like someone had scooped out the center of my chest with a spoon. Because that's what setting a boundary with family feels like sometimes. It's necessary, but it costs you something. And anyone who tells you otherwise has never had to do it. I'd spent 4 years trying to avoid that moment. 4 years of emails and lunch invitations and open-door policies. 4 years of bending. And they used every inch of that flexibility to plan the cruelest thing they could think of, humiliating me at the altar, in front of the people I love, on the most important day of my life. So no, I don't regret showing the video. Not because I wanted to humiliate them, but because 150 people, many of whom had been told for 4 years that I was the selfish one, the manipulator, the granddaughter who stole a house, finally saw the truth with their own eyes. I didn't narrate it. I didn't spin it. I just showed them what happened, and I let them decide for themselves. Here's what I want to ask you. Do you think I should have handled it privately? Pulled Diane aside, shown her the footage, and dealt with it behind closed doors? Or was showing it at the reception the right call, given what they did at the altar. I've gone back and forth on this myself, more times than I'd like to admit. Tell me in the comments. I read every single one. And if you're still watching, thank you. This is the hardest part of the story to tell. But what happened after Diane left, in the days and weeks that followed? That's the part I didn't expect. Let me tell you. The room stayed frozen for what felt like a full minute after the door closed behind Diane. Then Aunt Bev did what Aunt Bev always does. She picked up her glass of sweet tea, rose to her feet, and spoke. To Violet and Marcus. Her voice was steady and warm and carried to every corner. To honesty. To love that shows up. 150 people stood. The applause was not polite. It was the kind that comes from the gut. Loud, uneven, some people hitting the table. Mrs. Dalton was still crying. She crossed the room and wrapped her arms around me, her hands trembling against my back. Ruthie would have stood up and cheered, honey, she said into my shoulder. She would have cheered. That's when I cried. Not at the altar, not in the hallway. Here, in the arms of a 79-year-old woman who'd known my grandmother for 40 years. I cried because I was lighter, because for the first time in 4 years, I didn't have to carry the lie that I was the villain. Tyler came over next. He was red-faced and fidgeting. Diane told me Nolan was creepy, and to keep him away from the bridal area. I should have questioned it. I'm sorry. Nolan, standing 3 feet away, shrugged. You didn't know. We're good. The DJ, a kid from the church youth group Marcus had hired for $200, read the room perfectly. He put on What a Wonderful World. Louis Armstrong's voice filled the hall, and Marcus took my hand and led me to the floor. We danced. Not perfectly. I stepped on his foot twice. He didn't care. Nobody cared. For the first time that night, I was just a bride dancing with her husband. And that was enough. 2 days later. Monday morning. Marcus and I were at the kitchen table in Grandma Ruthie's house, drinking coffee and pretending that honeymoon at home was exactly what we'd planned. The October light came through the window the same way it always did. The roses outside were still blooming, late season, stubborn, just like her. My phone rang at 9:15. Diane. I picked up. Marcus raised an eyebrow. I put it on speaker. You destroyed this family. Her voice was flat, not angry, emptied out. No, I said. You replaced my wedding vows with a fake confession in front of 150 people. You destroyed it. Silence on the line. Then, Mom and Dad aren't talking to me. The cousins blocked me. Tyler told Aunt Carol everything. I can't. People at work are asking questions. Someone posted about the wedding on Facebook. I let her talk. I didn't interrupt. Can we at least talk about the house? Goodbye, Diane. I hung up, set the phone face down on the table. Marcus didn't say anything. He refilled my coffee. I sat there for a while, staring at the rose garden through the kitchen window. A cardinal landed on the fence post. Grandma Ruthie used to say, cardinals were visitors from people who loved you. That afternoon I called Aunt Bev. Thank you for coming. Thank you for standing up when it mattered. That's what family does, sweetheart, she said. Real family. Before we hung up, she mentioned one more thing. Your sister's realtor, Janet Hobbs, she called me this morning, said Diane withdrew the appraisal request on your house. Pulled it completely, no explanation. I set the phone down, looked at Marcus. He nodded once, slowly. They were done. And so was I. A week later, I found an envelope under the front door. No stamp, no return address. My father's handwriting, small, cramped, the letters leaning left the way they always did. He must have driven the 2 hours from Albany and slid it under the door without knocking. I sat on the porch swing and opened it. It was not an apology. Gerald Leclerc was not a man who apologized. What he wrote was something else. Quieter, clumsier, and harder to dismiss because of it. Violet. I should have stopped it. I didn't. Your mother has been frightened about the mortgage for 2 years, and I let that fear turn into something ugly. The pressure, the money, it doesn't excuse what we did. Any of it. I won't ask you to forgive me. I don't think I've earned that. But I want you to know that I remember your grandmother's roses. I helped her plant the first ones in 1978. She made me dig the holes because she said my hands were bigger. That was it. No mention of the house. No mention of selling. Just a man admitting he let fear make him cruel, and a memory of digging holes for rose bushes 48 years ago. I read it twice. I sat on that porch for a long time, watching the light move across the garden. The bushes Gerald helped plant were still there. Third row from the fence, the pink climbers, the ones Grandma Ruthie called the survivors. I didn't write back. Not that day. I wasn't ready. Some doors need to stay closed a while before you decide whether to open them again. But I didn't tear the letter up either. I folded it and put it in Grandma Ruthie's nightstand drawer, next to her reading glasses and her Bible. Marcus found me on the porch at sunset. You okay? Not yet, I said. But I will be. 3 months passed. January turned the rose garden bare, but the roots were alive under the mulch. Marcus and I settled into the house the way water settles into a riverbed. Slowly, then completely. He built bookshelves in the living room with reclaimed oak from a barn demolition in Valdosta. I lined them with library discards and Grandma Ruthie's old paperbacks. I put a little free library on the front porch, a wooden box with a glass door, painted blue to match the roof. I called it Ruthie's Little Library. Mrs. Dalton was the first person to leave a book. By February, there were 47. Aunt Bev drove up from Savannah every other Sunday for dinner. She'd sit in Grandma Ruthie's chair at the head of the table and tell stories about their childhood, about Ruthie sneaking out to dances, about the time she chased a rooster across the yard in her church dress. Marcus would laugh so hard he'd choke on his sweet tea. Tyler started coming too. He'd bring grocery bags full of produce from his girlfriend's garden, collards, sweet potatoes, late-season tomatoes. He never mentioned Diane. Neither did I. I didn't hear from my mother. Not once. I didn't expect to. My father sent another letter in February. It was shorter than the first. I enrolled in financial counseling through the church. Your mother and I are working with the bank. No one is coming for your house. I'm sorry it took me this long to say that. I sat at the kitchen table and wrote back on a piece of Grandma Ruthie's cream stationery. 4 sentences. I'm glad you're getting help, Dad. The roses are dormant, but the roots are strong. Marcus built a porch swing. It faces the garden. I didn't need them to be sorry. I needed them to stop. I found my real vows in March. I was cleaning out the bridal suite closet at the church. Pastor Davis had asked if I could help organize the storage room, and I'd said yes because that's the kind of thing you do in a small town. I was pulling old hymnals off a shelf when I found my coat. The ivory cardigan I'd worn to the rehearsal dinner. I'd left it hanging on a hook in the bridal suite and forgotten about it. I reached into the pocket and felt paper. Cream-colored, textured, folded in thirds. Diane had hidden my vows in my own coat pocket. Not thrown away. Tucked in, the way you'd stash something you wanted found eventually but never on time. Maybe she thought I'd discover them weeks later and realize what I'd lost. Maybe it was insurance. If the fake letter was discovered early, she could say, "They were in your pocket the whole time." I didn't care about the why. I cared about the words. I brought them home. That evening, when the light was low and gold, I took Marcus to the rose garden. The first buds of spring were just beginning to swell on the survivors. The pink climbers, 3rd row from the fence. I read my vows to him, out loud, standing in the dirt, no microphone, no audience. I learned what love looks like by watching my grandmother tend her roses every single morning. Love is not grand gestures. It's showing up. It's staying. It's choosing someone again and again, even when it's hard. Marcus, I choose you. Today, tomorrow, and every morning in this garden. Marcus cried. I'd never seen him cry before. Not at the altar, not in the hallway, Not once in 3 years. But here, in the garden, with no one watching, he let go. That was worth the wait, he said. I framed the vows that night, set them on the bookshelf he built, right next to Grandma Ruthie's photograph. She was smiling in the picture, kneeling in the roses, dirt on her knees. It felt like she was there. If you've made it this far, thank you, genuinely. This wasn't easy to share, and the fact that you stayed through every part of it means more than you know. Here's where things stand today. I still live in my grandmother's house on Maple Ridge Road. The roses are blooming. Ruthie's little library has 47 books and counting. Marcus built a porch swing last weekend. It faces the garden, just like I told my father. Aunt Bev comes for dinner every other Sunday. Tyler brings sweet potatoes. Mrs. Dalton leaves a new book in the library box every Tuesday. My sister hasn't reached out since that phone call. My mother hasn't spoken to me. My father sends a letter every few weeks, short, careful, never asking for anything. I write back when I'm ready. Sometimes that takes a day. Sometimes it takes 3 weeks. That's enough for now. I don't tell this story because I wanted revenge. I tell it because for 4 years, I was the villain in someone else's version of events. And the only way to correct that was to let the truth be seen. Not told. Seen. If you've ever had to stand up to your own family, not because you wanted to fight, but because they left you no other choice, I see you. And I hope you know this. Choosing yourself is not selfish. It's survival. Boundaries aren't walls. They're doors with locks. You choose who gets the key. If this story meant something to you, please share it with someone who needs to hear it today. And check the description for the next story. I think you'll want to hear that one too. One last thing. If I could go back to that altar and open that envelope again, knowing what I know now, I wouldn't change a single thing. Not one. Take care of yourselves. I'll see you there.